Welcome to FCCI's April 2025 edition of the Pathway to Purpose webinar series. And today we're featuring Lori Béen, founder of paNASH Career Counseling and Coaching. Lori is a dear friend and has served as an FCCI Business Leadership Group facilitator in the past in the Nashville, Tennessee region. And we'll bring Lori on in just a few minutes, and you'll enjoy getting to know Lori today. Well, in addition to that, we'd love for you to get to know one another today. And so if you would, please utilize that chat feature and introduce yourself. And we'll have some Q&A following Lori's presentation today. And we'd love to just welcome your thoughts, your questions, your insights as you post there in the chat as well. And one of our primary goals through this webinar series is to provide practical resources, insights to empower your kingdom leadership. And just this morning, I was reading from 1 Corinthians 4, and in verse 20, we read, "For the kingdom of God is not just a lot of talk, it's living by God's power." So here we are. The kingdom of God is not just about a lot of talk. It's about living by God's power. And that's what we want this to be a part of, to help you in that process. And so, yes, these webinars are filled with talking. And thankfully for all you counselors, you consultants, and coaches out there, the passage does not just say a lot of talk. It does say that you can talk, but not just a lot of talk. Our goal is to give you, through this process, strategies, through these webinars, strategies for living by God's power. And one of the newest initiatives from FCCI to accomplish that is Banded. And it serves the very purpose of providing this a platform where business owners can come together to spur one another on to excellent living, to excellent business by God's power. And you can learn more when you go to joinbanded.com. And we're also in just great anticipation of this year's gathering in Sarasota, Florida. That's September 22 through 24, where the theme is in perfect alignment with living by God's power, as we will all be encouraged to thrive in full, to lead healthily, lead faithfully, to live faithfully, and to impact eternally. So if you haven't received an invite for our gathering, please make that request via the conference website. You go to conference.fcci.org and request that invite. And finally, just before we bring Lori in for today's webinar, we'll be continuing next month in May. Our webinar series will feature Corey Carlson, and Corey will be speaking from his book, Win at Home First. And you'll thoroughly enjoy getting to know Corey. His insight, he's such a godly man. You'll just enjoy getting to know Corey. He'll speak from his personal experience, from his own spiritual journey, and that's May 20th, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We will have a link for registration to that webinar in our post-webinar resource email that you'll receive about an hour from now. And as I was praying over today's webinar, I was just so struck by the fact that this topic that Lori is bringing to us today is so beautifully aligned with that living by God's power. As we display God's power, honestly, probably best as we treat other people with dignity and with respect in our business. And in particular, when we're in those sometimes complex processes, those times of hiring and firing. And I'm so thankful for people like Lori Béen who have the expertise to provide guidance and biblical wisdom to navigate those HR processes. So Lori, it is such an honor to have you with us today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Ken, for having me. I really appreciate it. And I'm excited to talk about this because this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. It can be hard to remember what it's like to be on the other side of the hiring desk or the firing desk, but I see it every day through the eyes of my career coaching clients, especially through the hiring process, but also through the onboarding, the tenure, and the exit or severance process.
Yeah, well, I know that we're going to gain a lot of insight from that today. And Laura, you have provided such wisdom and counsel, guidance in our FCCI Business Leadership Group there in Nashville through the years. It's been such a pleasure for me to get to know you, for our team to be a part of that journey together with you. But tell us a little bit about that experience. How'd you get connected with FCCI originally? And you got involved. You went all the way to the point of saying, "Hey, I'll facilitate a group." So what was that like for you?
Yeah, so let's see. I was introduced by gentleman named Bob McCown,
Right.
and who's since passed away. But I
Hmm.
met him through doing outplacement counseling for him. I met him at a panel at the Entrepreneurial Center here in Nashville,
Hmm.
and he found out that I did career coaching, and he's like, "Oh, I really need an outplacement counselor for his PEO business that he was running at the time." And so I worked under contract for him whenever he had a client that needed to lay off employees, and I would come in and provide that career coaching and outplacement counseling for those employees.
Hmm. Yeah.
And then he introduced me to FCCI, and I just really fell in love with it and enjoyed it so much. It was, the highlight of my week, and I haven't been able to attend as much in the past couple of years, but I am trying to get back into our meetings, and I thoroughly enjoyed serving as a leader of our group. Our
All
group
right,
is near.
and we'll give you a little pass on the past couple years because something fairly significant happened about 2 years ago for you.
Yes, I got married for the first time at age 49.
It's been such a beautiful thing. We're so thankful for that, and yeah, so appreciate your involvement and all that you have poured into the lives of others through the years, because you do bring so much biblical wisdom. In fact, you went through the Gotham Fellowship, right? And that was a few years back.
Yes, that was in 2021. And that was another time where I was also facilitating the FCCI group while doing that, which was a challenge.
It was a
And I was
lot.
also caring for my uncle who was,
Mm,
he was ill with cancer. So it was a busy time,
mm,
but a very good time to learn a lot and dig into theology very deeply.
yeah, yeah. Well, you are someone who has tremendous endurance and discipline. I know that because you've been paddle boarding for how long now? How many years has this been a part of your life?
About 11 years, I believe. Yes.
And how did you get into paddle boarding? What got you there?
I had seen it, and I was like, oh, I want to try that. And I did, and I just was hooked from the start. Yeah, I started and went for a lesson in June of 2014, bought my own board the following month, and then the next month after that, in August of 2014, I was actually teaching beginner classes at the paddle boarding shop.
Oh, that's great. Okay, I know this we're winging it here a little bit, but that picture that you've got, you showed me just a minute ago. Can you grab that and show it?
Yeah,
I think that's just great. I love it. Standing there next to your paddleboard.
if I
Oh, there we
can.
go. uh,
Yeah, it's that one's a 14 footer.
little perspective there. That's great.
Yes.
Good times. Well, Lori, I am so thankful that we get to have this opportunity to hear from you. So I'll turn things over to you, let you take us through your presentation, and folks, just as a reminder, we will have a chance for some Q&A at the end. So if you would make sure that you will put those notes into the chat window there, and as you're going along, thoughts that you have, if you have things you'd like to share, and then of course any questions that you'd have for Lori to flesh things out further, or maybe to make particular application to your context. And she can do what she can there to help answer any questions for you today. So with that, Lori, I'll turn things over to you, and thanks again for taking us through.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken. I really appreciate it. So, as I was saying earlier, it can be hard to remember what it's like to be on the other side of the hiring desk. And I know that my clients come to me with concerns and criticisms of their experience in the hiring process, and throughout the process of their tenure with the company. But I also want to validate the listeners today with their common concerns and criticisms and highlight just a couple of those. Um, I know that some of these might sound very familiar. You might be like, yes, I agree. One of those being candidates sometimes give canned answers. Well, not my client, or my clients don't do that. At least I try to train them not to do that. But one thing to keep in mind if you are getting canned answers from candidates, it might be the kind of questions that you're asking, and it might just be changing up the questions that you typically ask. And I'm going to go over some of those examples of questions you might want to ask instead in a couple more slides here. And then also, I know that stereotypes exist for a reason. There's, candidates from certain generations have these stereotypes about them. I am a Gen Xer, so we were called slackers for a very long time. So there is some truth to those stereotypes that can be a concern or a criticism. And then also the common concerns, and criticisms from candidates. A couple here I would like to highlight, piggybacking on what I just said about the generations. Candidates from younger and older generations are experiencing still age discrimination. So typically when we think of age discrimination, we think of it happening to the older generations, which it does, but it also happens with the younger generations. And so that's something I want to kind of talk about a little bit today as well. And a really good book that I recommend is called From Strength to Strength by Arthur C. Brooks, if you haven't already heard of it. He talks about the difference between fluid knowledge in the younger generations and crystallized knowledge in the older generations. And I think it's important to have that kind of diversity in your staff and to have multi-generational employees and staff to really have a good team. And then another one I like to highlight is because it's something that happens so often. There are two different phenomenon. There's something called ghost posts. I have candidates who are really concerned because they might get duped by ghost posts, and what those are. I know that no FCCI company does this, but there are some companies who will post fake jobs just to give the impression to their current employees that they are growing or what have you. And then there are other fake job ads out there just to try to scam people to get their contact information. And so that's something that a lot of my clients are facing right now. And then also something that I have written about, I've been interviewed by the Wall Street Journal about it, is getting ghosted. After a candidate spends an enormous amount of time researching the company, preparing for interviews, multiple round interviews, traveling to and from the interviews and taking time off of their current job to do this. And then they get to the final round and someone else is selected, but they don't tell that candidate that someone else was selected. So we're going to talk a little bit about that too this afternoon. And that really kind of serves as the basis for the biblical standard that we're talking about today, the biblical principles. It's, treating people the way you want to be treated. And if you think about, if your wife or husband or your son or daughter is going through a job search and they have an interview and they think it went great and they didn't hear anything, that is very, very difficult for it's difficult for my clients and other candidates to bounce back from, because they lose a lot of confidence in that. And then that further hurts their performance in future interviews with other companies. So there's several things that business owners and their HR staff can do to carry out the scriptures in Matthew and Luke, which I'm going to cover today. And so let's go ahead and I want to start with the hiring process because, of course, that's where it all begins. And this is also where companies will make their first impression on a lot of people. They may or may not be as familiar with your product or your service, but they will learn a lot about that in the hiring process. So you want to make sure you're making good first impressions. And part of that includes just writing good job ads, being clear, being specific and realistic in the job ad, avoiding using industry jargon, because you don't really want to alienate someone who maybe has the skills and would be a great candidate for you if they are coming from another industry. And then another thing, I think a lot of companies tend to get used to just regurgitating and recycling the same job ads year after year or every time they've had to post it. So you want to update each job ad. And I recommend, if you don't already include the salary If you want to especially attract some younger blood, some of that fluid knowledge, then you want to include the salary in that ad, because younger generations, the Gen Zers, they are not even responding to job ads if they don't have the salary listed. Um, Another thing to keep in mind about job ads, if you are looking to hire more of a younger generation, they are going to Instagram and TikTok to find jobs and to look at job ads they see there, because they've lost a lot of faith in other places where people traditionally go to look at job ads because of the fake posts, the ghost posts, and what have you. In fact, I saw an article the other day. It said 50% of job seekers have lost faith in the job search process. So I'm hoping that some of these strategies I share today will help you rebuild their faith in that process. Um, Another thing I want to talk about is, knowing what to look for more than just educational degrees. You want to consider transferable skills and experience. And I think more companies are starting to realize the importance of this. In fact, I went to an event where the speaker was talking about how he breaks his resumes down into 3 stacks when he's looking at resumes. One for those who don't have any educational or don't have any college degrees, a stack for those who do have college degrees, and a stack just for those who are Ivy League graduates. And that third stack he takes and he throws it in the trash. He has his reasons for that, and that's a whole other topic, but it really does say a lot about experience as opposed to just education. And I think that's something important to remember and to be mindful of. Is understandably, like if you're hiring for an engineer, they have to have an engineering degree. But where it's not so stringent, I would encourage you to look at experience and skills over education. Also, another thing that has always been kind of a catch-22 for candidates is when they're applying for an entry-level job and the job ad says requires 3 years of experience. That is a little bit, I'm not sure what the word is for that, but you don't want to require 3 years of experience for an entry-level job, because one, the person who has the 3 years of experience is probably not looking for an entry-level job. And then the person who is entry level doesn't have 3 years of experience. But I would say, allow internships, job shadowing, volunteering to count as experience, and make this clear in the job ad if you do count those experiences as work experience, because a lot of times candidates will just look at the ad and immediately disqualify themselves and say, well, I don't qualify for this job, so I'm not going to apply. I want to skip down to another bullet about showing common courtesy, which that's what this whole presentation is about. But specifically, I want to talk about being on time for interviews. My clients know, and I think most job seekers don't have to be coached to know that they need to be at their job interview on time, if not 10 to 15 minutes early. However, I've seen instances where the employers were late for the interview. You need to keep in mind that these are candidates who probably have other interviews lined up later in the day. So you don't want to make them late for their other interviews. Also, becoming skilled in interviewing. So even if your company has a large enough and well-trained HR department to handle all the screening interviews, you and your hiring managers should also learn how to interview well. This means learning what questions are illegal in your state to protect yourself, and what are better worded questions that will help you gather that better information, as opposed to pointless questions like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I think everyone got the answer to that question wrong in 2015, because no one expected to be in a pandemic 5 years from then. So a better worded question would be, tell me what you've accomplished in the last 5 years. Another question that tends to get asked is, what are your greatest weaknesses? But I have a friend who's an HR recruiter, and she prefers to ask, what annoys you? I think it's harder to have an escape route on that question. And I think you get a more honest answer from that type of question. Also, knowing how to handle salary discussions. As I said earlier, Gen Zers are looking to see what the salary is before they even apply for the job. And also, there are several states who have they've now made it illegal to ask, what is your salary history? And I think other states are going to be following suit soon. And I don't see the relevance of what someone's past salary is, especially if they might be making a career change, to what they're coming into. Also, I recommend not asking the candidate's salary expectations if you're not going to also disclose the salary in the job ad. So a better question to ask is, can you tell me about a time when you've impacted your employer's bottom line, either directly or indirectly? And I also read recently, I think it was just last week, that Gen Zers are more likely to say that they negotiate their starting salaries. They're more likely than any other generation to do that. So you need to be prepared for that and be able to have these conversations. One that I'm going to touch on that might ruffle a few feathers, especially for those who love personality assessments. They have their time and place. The hiring process is not the time to be using personality assessments. In fact, I think it's the DISC on their website. They do have a disclaimer that says, we don't recommend that you use our product to make hiring decisions. They're great for using during the onboarding process and the team building process to figure out who works best with each other. Also, keep in mind that the results of these tests depend often on how the person's feeling that day, whether they're stressed or not. So you have to take those results with a grain of salt. I had a client once who she had a stellar resume. She had worked with several big companies in New York. She came here to Nashville. She applied for a job with a smaller company that didn't have its own HR department, so they probably weren't aware that they were misusing personality assessments in the hiring process. But they had her jump through a lot of hoops. She had to give a presentation. They were like, "We love you." They pretty much told her she had the job without officially telling her that yet. And they're like, "There's just one more thing that we need you to do. And we need you to take," I think it was the DISC, that personality assessment. And after she took it, it was like crickets. And they pretty much said, "We're just going to go a different direction." And she came to me after that. She was almost in tears. And she said, "Yeah," the way she described, she's like, "I felt violated." And I think it's important to remember to look again at the skills and the person's experience and not let something that tries to put people into a box, because we try to categorize people. And I think a lot of personality assessments do that when they shouldn't do that. Also, I want to speak again about the ghosting. Taking the time to follow up with, obviously you can't follow up with every candidate who applied for a job, but at least those who are in the final round of candidates, to let them know your decision, to not keep them hanging and to give them closure. I have clients who say, "I would rather hear a no than hear nothing at all." So yes, and then let's take a look at the onboarding process, ways we can improve this. And not just the onboarding process, but the whole tenure of your employee while they're there. Not requiring a bunch of unnecessary meetings is always a good route to go. And other time wasters you want to avoid, especially for those who are in what you would call doer roles, such as a developer or a builder of things. They should be out doing instead of sitting in meetings. But when meetings are necessary, because they are at times, make sure that you stick to the agenda, start on time and end on time. And one thing that I recommend and I love the idea of is something that builds morale and loyalty among your employees. And that is supporting your employees in pursuing their outside passions. I work with clients on helping them find what they're passionate about. And if they're not able to implement their passion into their career, I try to find other ways to help them find that outlet. And you can do that as well. An example of this is giving limited time off, limited paid time off for your employees to volunteer with their favorite nonprofit or community service project. I once worked for a university that did this. It was one of the benefits. And it not only improved employee morale, but it also improved the university's reputation in the eyes of the local community. Another example is something that I like is maybe having like a show and tell once a month or once a quarter, where one or more of your employees can give a lunch and learn on something they're passionate about and showcase their hobby to their work friends who want to learn more about it. I know when I was in school, when I was a kid, I loved show and tell. That was my favorite day of school. And so I think you can still do this as adults. And like I said, it builds morale, it builds community among your employees, and it also builds loyalty. Another way to build loyalty among your employees is to help your employees grow professionally and build their skill set. So a few examples of how to do this is providing adequate career development tracks and opportunities. I'm highlighting just a few on this slide. Teaching leadership skills, not just how to lead others, but also how to lead themselves. And then allowing them also, kind of piggybacking on leading themselves, allowing them to set their own goals for their role. So that gives them ownership over their role. A nice little quote there from the Director of Graduate and Executive Education at the University of Tennessee Haslam College of Business. And any questions so far, Ken, that you feel like we need to cover before we move on to the next topic?
No, but I'll put that chat remind up there real quick.
Okay,
So for
yeah,
those that
thank
have,
you.
I have a couple of things that I'd love
Sure.
to chat about, and but folks, if you do have some questions, please do feel free to submit those there. You had mentioned 50% of job seekers have lost faith in the process. That shocked me. That
Yes, it's very
that should wake
shocking.
us up a little bit.
It should. It should.
There's work that needs to be
And
done.
yes, things that need to be done differently, thinking outside the box. And I think, I have to teach my clients too how to think outside the box,
Mm,
because a lot of them will come to me and I'll say, what have you been doing so far to find uh, opportunities? And they all say the same thing. I look on LinkedIn, I looked
yeah.
on Indeed, I look on ZipRecruiter. And that is not a good use of their time,
Mm,
because it is the black hole, it is the
right.
graveyard, it's where the ghost posts are. So I have to teach them how to think differently and approach their job search differently.
Yeah, yeah. What
Mhm.
else do you think plays into that decline, to where there's that lack of trust in the process? Just how hard it is to go through the process, the hiring process, just lack of
Yeah,
ability to connect with people, to make progress.
yes, I think it's several things. I think it's the hiring process it tends to be too cumbersome
Mm,
and too lengthy.
mm,
Um, So I think it's working on making it easier for people. It might be easier for the company to have, them apply online.
mhm.
But when you think about, you're on the other side of the desk there, and you've got to fill out an application for each
Right.
company, an online application, and you're doing a lot of copying and pasting, but you're still having to do one for each individual company. They might use
Hmm.
a different software program or what have you. No one can solve the problem of standardizing that yet, but it, it's it's hard to make suggestions for that other than
Mm,
what we're suggesting here without some major overhauls.
yeah. How much,
Mhm.
there's been all this conversation about remote work, right? It just
Yes.
continues. But how much does that play into decision for someone who is looking for a role. How much do you
Mhm.
feel like that weighs in? Maybe even from your own, clients that you've worked with.
Yes, I think, I have some clients who are like, they can't work at home. They want to be back in
Mm-hmm.
the office. And then you got the ones who work better from home. And I think maybe it's finding out, who works best how, and if there's some way to create some kind of hybrid opportunity, at
Mm,
least for those, because I know personally I work better from home. Ever since I left my full-time job to start my own career coaching practice, I work so much better, more efficiently from my home office than
yeah,
I ever did working in a career center at a university.
yeah, yeah. So it definitely depends. So that brings me to the other question I had was about, as you were talking about the personality assessments
Yeah.
from the perspective of someone who's job seeking, who's out there looking. Should I have my personality assessment results on my resume? If I've gone through a particular one, should I go ahead and just put that forward?
That's a great question. I would say don't shoot yourself in the foot. Don't limit yourself. Don't let anyone else put you in a box by,
Mm,
giving that information right off the bat. You want to be able to get in and have a conversation with someone so they can get to know you and your true personality and see what you're really like, as opposed to just some results on. Um, I will tell you, social scientists will even tell you that a lot of these personality tests are pseudoscience. Um, they're not always completely scientific.
mm, yeah. Well, we do have a question that's coming in here, so I'll pop that up. It's not that one, but here we are. So the question of, I'm always hearing you just won't find a job unless you know someone. What are your
Mhm.
thoughts on that line of thinking? It's about network, who you know.
Yes. Well, that's the thing when people tell me, oh, I've been looking at all these job ads and I haven't found anything. My next question for them is, how much time are you spending networking? And usually you've got, if at best, you've got people spending 80% of their time searching for jobs online and 20% networking, when really they need to have that reversed, because 80% of the workforce have found their jobs through networking. So it makes sense to use 80% of your time networking. And there are ways that I teach my clients how to do that, other than what you might think of in the traditional sense of networking. And I especially teach those who are introverted how to network in a way that is more effective for them and also a little bit more comfortable for them. But we also don't want them to get too much in their comfort zone.
Sure. And another question that's come in here, Lori. And so, how do you best assess job fit? What's that process?
Yes. So is this from the perspective of, is the question coming from an employer or from a job seeker? I would say we may not know that, but I think it is being honest with, if it's the candidate, being honest with
Mm-hmm.
themselves about what they're really looking for and being willing to hold out as long as they can financially to find the thing that is best for them. And sometimes that comes through doing more and more research on the company and the company's core values.
Mm.
For the company itself, is okay, what do your core values really mean? You
Yeah.
can hang
Right.
those up on the wall in a nice, pretty frame. But I teach my clients to ask the question in the interview, tell me about a time how you've carried out your core values, or what do your core values look like on a day-to-day basis?
Mm. So good.
Because that's going to help my clients understand better how they fit
Sure.
with that company.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, good. With that,
Mhm.
I'll let you continue on with the
Sure.
presentation
Yes.
here. But that's great.
Thank
Thank you.
you. So finally, we'll look at the exit process, and if you're having to conduct a layoff, the severance process. One thing is improving the exit interview. Um, how you do this is you always want to use an unbiased third party to conduct the interview, such as an HR person. Make the employee feel comfortable enough to share honest feedback and critique without any kind of retaliation. Show empathy, ask for examples of the employee's critique, and ask the employee what the company could have done better. And use that information to improve and make changes in that process. And then when you're having to, unfortunately, conduct a layoff and let go of some people, then you want to provide outplacement counseling as a part of their severance package. And this benefits you, the company, in 4 ways, as you can see here. It protects the company's brand and reputation, mitigates the risk of litigation and even workplace violence, and reduces the cost of unemployment benefits, and most of all, provides you the opportunity to do the right thing for your employees. And that's something that I mentioned earlier. That's how I met Bob McCown, a longtime member of FCCI. And he brought me in to do that. And I am available to other companies for that and provide discounted rates for various group sizes. I also include in my career coaching career etiquette training. And I know that that's something that a lot of employers are really needing lately, because they have employees who've come out of college. These are the younger generation that spent their 4 years of college during the pandemic learning online and not having the ability to, or the opportunities to learn social skills, etiquette, even things such as simple as eye contact, how to communicate with others. And that's something I instill in my clients and work with them on as we go through the process of their job search. And there's a QR code for anyone who's interested, possibly in those outplacement counseling services. I do also have a subscription plan if that works better for you. And yes, so this is something I love doing. It's something that has been my entire career. I've been doing career coaching for 25 years. I like to say since the turn of the century, since 1999. Started off in college career services, then went on and started my own career coaching practice. And I've seen so many different job markets. I've seen a job market with a recession, a pandemic. I've seen the ups and downs over the past 25 years. And if anyone would like to reach me, there's contact information here on my last slide. And if they just have questions after this webinar, I'm happy to answer those questions.
Awesome. Well, Lori, thank you. And that the presentation PDF deck that will be coming to you in our email. For those of you that have registered for today's webinar, that will come to you. So you'll have that in just the next little bit here. So you'll be able to follow up and get in touch with Lori and pursue that. If by chance, some of you, as you're thinking about, what's that process, as Lori was talking about, how do you do those exit interviews? How do you go through that process of layoffs and do it in a biblically consistent manner? Someone who has done that in the past and who can speak to that process is John Beckett, Beckett Enterprises, Elyria, Ohio. In fact, I just pulled up our podcast episodes here because we have John talking about when he had to do that. And it was hard. It was brutally difficult for him to have to lay people off. But the way they did it, you can learn so much from that. And so I would encourage you, it's episodes 93 through episode 97, or John Beckett is talking about how to navigate challenges in business. So another resource, another way for you to kind of hear from someone who just from the perspective of the owner who went through the process and said, okay, how do I do this in a way that will honor the Lord and honor these people and treat them as Lori has just described today? How do we do that? So Lori, do you have any other examples of when you've seen it done well and kind of what that process has been like? And can you share any other insights as to personal experience or business owners that you know of that have had to lay people off, or some that have said, I just really won't. I'm not going to do that. And why?
Yes. Well, there's been a couple of instances where I was brought into the process too early. They wanted me there when the candidate or when the employee got the notice and got the announcement that they were being laid off. And that does not work well for what I'm doing if I'm coming in and doing outplacement counseling, because then they associate me with bad news and they don't want to take advantage of the service that the company's paying for. So you want them to take advantage of the service that you're paying for, and letting me be that person who's not associated with the bad news and being that soft place for them to land a few days after they've had some time to process it and do some grieving. And there is grieving involved.
Sure.
And that's something that I kind of walk them through as well, that grieving process, while helping them get back up on their feet, help them find something that's next for them. And by the time I come in with that, there's almost like they've reached a little bit of relief and readiness to start this process. Another thing I would say is I'm not sure what kind of experience some employees have had in the past, but whenever I've come in and it's with an employee who's been laid off before, years ago, they will say, I was a little hesitant to take advantage of the service because of the past experience I've had. I'm like, what's happened? And
Right.
they don't really go into detail, but they'll just say to me, they're like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. This is so much better than I thought it was going to be. And I'm like at a loss because I'm like, this is just how I thought,
Yeah.
this happens and
Right.
how you do this, because this is how
It should
I
be
work
this
with my
way.
clients.
Yeah.
Yes. So it is something that, I do try to show my clients compassion and understanding. And I think sometimes if you get a company that does this, that's much bigger and they've done this, a certain way for so many years, it can come off as uncompassionate and not as, it just makes them feel like a number
Right.
instead of someone who really cares.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, one of the comments that came in, Sam Nixon, thank you, Samuel, for this comment. But just he mentioned the fact that oftentimes the best way to find employees is through referral. So, how does that, as you're counseling, how do you kind of talk through that process? What is the best way for someone to say, okay, referral, but how do I truly leverage that? And it's not just a happenstance. I was at a party and I just happened to talk to somebody who just happened to know, right? How do
Yes.
we actually get that to be a little more systematized?
Yes, I'm a really big believer in informational interviews. It's something that I was taught. It's something I use on my own, and it's something I teach my clients. And
Mm,
I'm amazed at how many people to this day, when they come to me, they're like, "No, I've never heard of that. I don't know what informational interviews are." And so, what for those who don't know, it is having a meeting with someone who's either doing what you already doing what you want to do, or they're working for a company or in an industry that you want to go into, and just finding out their story,
mm,
their career path, how they got to where they are, what they think are the skills that someone needs to make that transition into that career, what they like most about it, what they like least about it, and just having those deeper conversations, as opposed to casting a net wide, going to a networking event where you spend maybe 5-10 minutes with 20 people and you get their business card, and there's just not a lot of depth there. And so you might think, okay, well, yeah, you might go deeper with someone in an informational interview, but you're not going to grow your network. You're not going to meet as many people. That's not true, because one of the questions I tell my clients they always need to ask at the end of each informational interview is, do you have the names of 2 or 3 other people you think I should also speak with? And then you repeat that process with those referrals, and it just kind of snowballs from there. And then you can maintain the relationship that, from the very first informational interview by providing them an update with your meetings with their referrals, so that they know, hey, this person you refer me to was a great referral. I really appreciate it. Here's where I am now. Here's what this has led to. So that's how I coach my clients on how to expand their network and really get to know people. In fact, I had a client who she started about a month or so ago. And she had never heard of this concept. And when I told her about it, she was excited. And in the first week, she got 3 or 4 informational interviews scheduled in just the first week, from our first meeting to our
that's
second
great.
meeting. Yeah. And so now she's had like, I've lost track of how many job opportunities that has led to. She's had several actual job interviews from that without having to ever fill out an
Hmm.
online job application.
Yeah. See, that's what's beautiful. I love that. And it happens very naturally through organizations
Yeah.
like an FCCI and all the others that are out there, where there is that ability to say, not only just being able to go out and have those interviews where you're in that process of getting to know the industry, getting to know who's out there, but also be on the same bandwidth spiritually is
Right.
really an amazing part of the piece of the puzzle. And I'm so thankful that at FCCI that we're part of that. We're part of that network that allows there to be those kinds of that connective tissue within so many different industries, so many different verticals. And so I'm
Right.
thankful that we get to be a part of that to some degree to help in that process. And we see it
Yes,
as part of the
say
kingdom
yes to
building.
informational interviews. If someone asks you for one, say yes to
Right,
it.
right. Well,
Yes.
that's great. Lori, thank you. Any final thoughts before we wrap up here today?
In addition to just, being willing to do informational interviews with potential candidates or job seekers, I would say if your company is able to host some panels or
Hmm,
events on topics that would be of interest to people that would want to
that's a great
work for your
idea.
company or be qualified,
Yeah.
I tell my clients, I'm like, try to find those opportunities instead of attending, a generic networking
Hmm.
event, because at least if you go to something like that, if you don't meet someone, your time isn't wasted. You come back with having something that you've learned. You've gained some more information. So
Yeah.
any kind of panels or any kind of like open house for your company, for them to learn more about your company and your values and your company culture, that is one way to really, I think, find the kind of candidate that you're looking for,
Hmm.
instead of having to make the process a process that they're losing faith in.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love that, and it brings such value to the community. So here
Yes,
you
it
are
does.
again as a company in that community where you're strategically saying how can we help improve this community by providing those kinds of opportunities for growth and learning and getting inside the company and understanding who are you, what do you do, what are the roles, all those kinds of things. That's just incredibly valuable to the community
Yeah,
as a whole. So yeah,
definitely.
that's a great. I love that. Well, Lori, thank you. We appreciate your time
Thank you,
today.
Ken.
Thanks for doing this
Yep,
and being with
of
us. And
course. I enjoyed it.
thanks for delivering all this great information. So, as we wrap up here, we'll encourage you to join us again next month. We'll be together on May 20th, and as Corey Carlson will be coming to us and speaking. So, hopefully, you can join us then. Look for that email. It'll be coming out to you here in just a little bit with the information and the slide deck from today. And we'll look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks for joining us.